Welcome back to the Wellness Wire, episode number 9. We're on episode number 9, third episode of the new year. We are rolling. We're staying consistent with it. Today we're joined by Wade and Ryan, and we've got a fun episode. We're going to be talking about sober living, our experience with living in sober living, managing sober livings, running sober livings, all things sober living. We're going to share some funny stories, good memories, and just practical tips and life lessons that we've learned in this space. So it's going to be a really fun episode. Super happy Ryan can join us this week. So why don't we just get rolling into it? First off, why don't we start with everyone share, starting with Wade, a little bit about your personal experience with sober living. Just to qualify.
Yeah. So I came to Arizona in 2017. After I went to treatment, I took the suggestion and went to sober living for the sole purpose of really just appeasing everybody else. I didn't really think I would enjoy it whatsoever, and my entire goal was to get a job and after 1 month move out of it. I did do that and did not stay sober. I went back to the same company that was a sober living, and it didn't work out a second time because I couldn't stop getting high and wasn't really able to follow the directions or rules of the house. And then I bounced around just like trial days at a couple sober livings until about a year later, after another run, I ended up in P&G Sober Living. Our good friend Paul Garcia, shout out to Paul.
Gonna be a big part of today's episode. He'll be
a big part of today's episode. And then I actually only went through 2 of his houses. One was a very short stay. Ryan, I'm sure will tell you about that. And then the other one I was in and out of for about a 2-year span, in and out of that house for a 2-year span. So I definitely qualify. I've seen the good and I've seen the bad, and I've seen a couple of the in-between ones of sober living, and I'm happy that's what we're talking about today.
Awesome. Ryan?
Yeah, my story started in 2016. So I went to treatment in Arizona City. I wasn't taking anybody's suggestions the first time around, right? And my mom was enabling at the time, so I just went back to her house, right? Didn't, followed my own advice. That didn't last. I got high that day, went back to the treatment center 10 days later. And something clicked in me, and some dude that's no longer with us, he ended up becoming one of my best friends. He came in and he had this smile on his face, and like he had this joy about him, right? His name was Caleb. And he said, you should come to Paul's. Like, you should come to Paul's Sober Living. And so, like, spur of the moment, made that decision, right? I'm going to go to Paul's. So I ended up at Paul's, and, I spent a year and a half. I think I hold the record, honestly. So I moved out, like, 3 separate times, but stayed sober the whole time. And moved back, right, to several houses for personal reasons. But yeah, man, I would not be here if it wasn't for sober living. I cherish the memories, good and bad, funny and sad, the joyful moments. And I was just talking about this before the pod, right? Like, there's moments where I miss it, right? The idea of it, like that camaraderie and that connection. And when you're going through a bad day, there's 5, 6, 7 other dudes there that you're close with that you can talk to and get different perspective, right? Whether it's 7 a.m. or 2 a.m., right? Like, there's somebody there, right? So yeah.
No, that's awesome. And fun fact, so all 3 of us have gone through Paul's Sober Livings and the River Source. So that's kind of like that's what kind of brought us all together, in a sense, is being connected with everybody through those 2 places. So that's really cool. My experience with sober living in 2020, went to treatment at the River Source, Arizona City. And then afterwards, moved into one of Paul's houses. That's where I met these 2 guys back in 2020. I've been to, I think, like 4 different Paul Garcia houses over that span. And then I actually had the privilege of living and managing and throughout the entire time where Plugged In went from 4 houses to 11 houses. I was living and managing houses that entire time on the Plugged In front. So I got to experience both sides of things, like living in the houses and the challenges that come with that, and then also like working for Wade throughout that time as well. So
managing houses too. You opened and managed what, 5?
Yeah, and you know, senior's gonna be upset, but I still haven't gone and got all my stuff. I have stuff stashed at like 4 different houses. I got stuff everywhere. So, and I know he's gonna be the first one who watches this when it drops. So hopefully by the time this is released, I did go pick up all my stuff. Yeah, so this, and then that's the whole point of this episode is we want to show, like Ryan and Wade were talking about, that, you know, there's a stigma around sober living where it's like, oh, it's gonna be a dump. All they want is my rent money. They're not gonna try to help me. Everyone in there is gonna be straight out of prison. Like, these are all things that you think about if you're not familiar with it. And so we just want to share our personal experiences about the relationships we built, lessons we've learned, and like some memories and stuff that we have. So we're going to start off probably with the most fun segment. It's just sober living stories. You know what I mean? Fun things that happen that may not have even been fun in that moment, but they're funny to look back on. So yeah, we're going to get started with that. I know Wade and Ryan, they lived together in one of Paul's houses back in the day, so they're going to have a lot of good ones there. And I'm going to share with you some of the stuff that we have seen over the past 2 years of just running plugged-in houses, which have been equally as crazy, just from the other side of the coin. So let's get rolling. Who has... Whoa, hold on. Because I know everyone's got at least one good one. Let's just go around and start off with everyone's juiciest one they have. The one that like immediately stands out in your mind when you think about your fondest sober living story.
Fondest or juiciest?
Juiciest. Ryan's got one in the chamber.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple, bro, but I think, and we were just talking about it, I think the one that stands out the most involves me, Wade, and our friend Sam, right? I remember, so this was my second time in sober. I came back because me and my ex had broken up. We had an apartment together, and obviously that's one of the dope things about, you know, being close with the sober living owner and sober living in general is there's always that safety net, right? So there was an assistant manager position that opened up, so I move in, and shortly after, Wade shows up, right? And I think, I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't long, right? Like, he shows up, he does his whole move-in process, then he leaves for a little bit, and comes back, and me and Sam are still up, and we see him, and his eyes are just bulging out of his face, right? So immediately we know something's up, right? So, you know, the notorious call Paul, right?
Call Paul.
You better call Paul. So we called Paul. I was like, hey man, I think Wade's messed up. Like, what do you want us to do? He's like, UA him. So we UA him, right? And this is gonna expose me and him a little bit. So what I learned my first time in sober living is I have stage fright when it comes to UAing, right? So for the first like 20 times I UA'd, I went shit as well, right? Because when you poop, you also pee a little bit, right? So I always used to torture the house manager.
Turn the faucet on.
Garrett went through hell with me. Sorry, Garrett. So when it was Wade's turn and he's got stage fright, probably because he's tweaked out, right? Like, I'm like, well, try this. I used to do this all the time, right? So I just remember him being like, it's me, Sam. I walk in for a second and like he's sitting there and he's just like, you know what I mean? So he doesn't end up peeing. He goes to the room. We call Paul. It's like, bro, he can't pee. He's clearly tweaked out, right? And then we go in the room and tell him to call Paul, right? Because we couldn't get him to admit it, but Paul had this gift that it takes 10 seconds to get the truth out, right? I don't know what it is, but it's God-given. So we go back in the room to check on him like 30 minutes later, and it's complete darkness. He's laying in the corner bed with his eyes like this with the flashlight, and he's like, Paul said I could stay the night, I just have to be out in the morning. And we're like, oh, okay. Okay, so we just leave. And it was just like, it was like one of those moments that always sticks in your brain of like, I don't know if this dude's gonna live, right? Like, but we care about him, you know? And you could tell that like, he wants to be sober, he's just so lost, right? But it's that, and there's so many stories like that, right? When I think it sticks out because, you know, I've known Wade since 2018, it was 2018, right? 2018. So it's like, when you have that long-standing relationship with somebody and you see those specific moments that are just so bananas, to see the other side of the coin, right, is just, it's something that, you know, will always be etched in my brain.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, dude, unfortunately, like, I'm the cause of most of the wreckage, even in my own stories. That one was a time. Another time, I had relapsed, and I always get away with it for like 3 days, and then after 3 days, I just can't hold it together type of scenario. I remember it was around Christmas time, and my excuse was always like, I gotta go run some errands and do these things, right? So I ran some errands, and I had gotten a elf costume for the holidays, was my excuse, and I was found in the garage with just black all over my face in an elf costume in the garage from the house manager and Drew at the time and Kyle, good friends of ours. I think he was the assistant for the time being. And just them like interrogating me, being like, wait, like you have blacks? And I was like, oh no, like I fell and I was working out, and they're like, you're working out in an elf costume? And I'm like, dude, it just, that was bananas. We had a guy whose last name was Favre, and he had me convinced he was Brett Favre's cousin, family relation. But a couple times he was very close like me, of like just couldn't get it together type of guy. And just watching people when you're on the other side of it, like even when I was in the house sober, and seeing other people like just dead to rights caught, but like still denying, and but they can never pee. They always all of a sudden have stage fright. That was a thing. I remember getting into it with a house manager when I had first moved in, and we about chores, and he was like dusting with his finger in a white glove, and I was like, who else is getting a white glove treatment, right? Like, why is this happening to me? And then he took all these papers and he like spread them throughout the house to like see if I was vacuuming. So I just like went to the printer and I just took every piece of paper out and I ripped it up in little shreds and just threw it everywhere. And because his chore was floors the next week. Dude, I have just like a lot of just like little one-offs that happen. One of our good friends doing another girl's laundry in our sober living and making fun of him for that. There's just a lot of things that take place.
So sober living is just such an interesting place because it's like when you think about the concept, right? It's kind of crazy if you were to explain to somebody who has no idea about like recovery or anything, and you're just like, so really the business model is we're gonna get a house and we're gonna put 10 recovering alcoholics and drug addicts. They're all gonna be within like their first year of sobriety, and we're gonna have them hold each other accountable and drug test each other to learn how to like live life.
It's a reality show that isn't filmed.
Yeah, it is.
1,000%.
It's a crazy concept if you think about it. You're like, well, that can't possibly work, man. But it does, dude. But with that, you get just these wild stories of like what things people do in early sobriety, man. It's like it's pretty crazy. We've seen some good ones too of just like having the houses and like things that guys do in the house, and you're like, what are you thinking? Like what? Like I remember one time Wade and I are golfing. It's like probably like a Wednesday or Thursday. It's like 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock, and we're golfing with Paul actually. And we get a call, and they're like, this guy's been in the shower for 2 hours. Just like we think he's getting high in the bathroom.
Yeah,
like he's not answering, he's not opening the door. The shower's been running for 2 hours, and we're like, oh no, dude, like we gotta go like figure out what's happening. So we like drive off the golf course, you know what I mean, and like drive over to this house, and we're banging on this door, and we open, and the guy finally like opens it. He's just been like, you know, smoking fentanyl that entire time in the bathroom. And we bring him downstairs and we're talking to him. We're trying to be like, well, what can we do for you? Do you want treatment? Do you want this? And he goes, you know what? I think I just got another sick one in me. He's like, I think I've got one more in me, and I'm gonna go to a motel in Mesa, and you can tell my mom, and just like casually was like, I'm just gonna go back out.
Some of the behaviors you see.
He did end up in detox 2 days later.
Yeah, he did. He did end up back. And the funniest thing is this specific person actually did go back to detox and afterwards went to one of Paul's houses. So you see how everything is just so intertwined. I remember one time I got a call and they were like, this guy's got a kitten in the house. And we're like, what do you mean? He's like, he's got a kitten. And so I drive down, I was in Scottsdale, I drive all the way down to South Chandler where he's at, and sure enough, dude, I'm knocking on the same bathroom actually, same house, and I'm like, dude, what's going on? He answers the door, dude, he's naked, no clothes on, foil all over the torch, everything, and he's got a kitten, doesn't know where he got the kitten, doesn't know anything about what had occurred up to that point, so now I have to like, one, get this guy out of the house, I can't let him take the kitten with him. We don't even know where he got it. Humane Society won't take the cat. They said put it back where he found it. He doesn't know where he found it. So I ended up having to like foster this cat for like 2 days until we found like a sanctuary in Gilbert that could take it in, this kitten. But dude,
you tried to pawn the cat off on me, dude.
I called everybody I know that like had animals. I'm like, please take this kitten. We don't know what to do with it. But we kept it. We didn't tell Wade or Senior, but we kept it at the sober living for 2 days until we could figure out what we're gonna do with it.
Some of the behaviors you see are just insane, dude. I remember this kid, like this was my first time with like Garrett and all them in the sober living. We're driving down the street. I don't know where we're going, whether it's birds or whatever where we were going at the time. And we see this kid dragging his mattress to the park, right? And like we're like, what the is going on, dude? And so we pull over. He's like, well, you know, he said Paul said I couldn't have any girls over, so I thought it'd be a good idea to just spend the night with my girl at the park. And I was like, what are you doing, dude?
He's dragging the mattress from the sober living.
Yeah, it's like you think this is a good idea in your head. Right, like that's the insanity behind these people that are coming into sober living, dude.
Yeah, man. It's like, it's the funniest thing, like seeing what people do, man. I remember one time we had just opened up our Vista house down in South Chandler, and this is like a really nice house. It's in a beautiful neighborhood, right? Like you would never in a million years like look at this and be like, oh, this is a sober living, right? Yeah. And that comes challenges because you have to be like super careful with neighbors and stuff because they're not gonna want that. A lot of crazy stuff going on. And I remember when we opened this house, we were trying to be very conscious about like who we brought in there. And we brought in this one guy that we had a bunch of experience with, has been to a bunch of our other houses, and he's been kind of a problem guy. And I remember one time he used to do this thing where he would just abuse his Suboxone and sleeping meds and take them all at like one time, and he would put them into like this sleepwalking trance. And I remember one time I got woken up. These guys are at the brink of fist fighting. And he had woken up, I guess, sleptwalked into somebody else's room across the house and just peed all over his hamper, like in his room, and then just like wanted to go back to bed, and like didn't want to clean it up or anything, man. It's like that's the kind of stuff you can expect sometimes when you move into a sober living. I know you probably got some more.
Yeah, man. I mean, you get, as far as like, we're talking about crazy one-off situations, I think that I see people who just are in the midst of a sick one and they're trying to get out of it, but they're not ready to get out of it. And I see people who try to bring in fake pee. Mm-hmm. You see people who, I had a guy who stole from Walmart, and it was just like, this guy has no money, but he keeps having new things from Walmart, and I'm like, bro, like.
And all the other guys in the house are like, we know it. You gotta consequences.
So, dude, you see a plethora of all those things, but at the end of the day, I think that I don't want to scare people from going into sober living as well. I think it becomes very easy for people to take a little bit of, we have the Paul approach, right? Where it's like, hey man, like, here's our house, here's the rules, abide by them. And I've lately, implemented with Senior a little bit even more of I would call it the Tom Fay approach, right? The Gambit approach of like, if you're gonna live here, you're gonna do what we do, and this is how we do it. Mm-hmm. And I found a mixture of those two things to be just super helpful in keeping people in a sober state of mind, and all with the goals that we put in place to advance them to a higher level of life, because it isn't a spot that they're supposed to live their whole life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, sober living is a stepping stone, a transition for you to get back on your feet, for you to save a bunch of money. And then I get people who don't have addiction problems who ask all the time, just because of the price, can I move into sober living? I promise I'll stay sober. You know, right. It's a very good opportunity for a lot of people, but you are gonna have one-off situations of people who are in the midst of it. Hidden pets. We had someone who wanted to bring in a tarantula.
One time we walked in and there was a fitness pole installed into the garage for fitness purposes.
Yeah.
All sorts of
female
stuff.
Fitness.
Yeah. And but I think that's a good segue into kind of like what we can talk about next. And you know, the main thing about sober living above all else is just accountability, right? Like, what you can expect from really any sober living program is that you're going to be drug tested regularly, and the accountability that comes with that as far as maintaining sobriety. But also, like, there's meeting requirements and chores, and there's like a structure to the program, all with the idea of introducing accountability into your life, whether it's accountability from your peers, accountability from senior or des, or in a self-accountability. So we can talk a little bit about that aspect as well, because it's like you see both sides of it. It's either one guy, the house decides that they don't like this one guy, so they form a coup and they start trying to like target this guy, like, look at that, he left his dishes out, like, and they start doing everything they can to try to get this one guy out. And then you see the other side where it's like somebody may be loved in the house and everybody loves them, but he's messing up, but they want to like protect him, you know what I mean? They want to be like, well, no, give him another chance, you know? So, but it's like, that's what you can also see in sober living, and you got to learn how to like manage both sides of that. But yeah, why don't we just touch on the structure of sober living, and from your own experience.
Yeah, no, so I mean, for me, like, you know, coming from a kid who had zero accountability, like, you know, I didn't have a present father, right? My mom was very guilt driven on a lot of things, so she let me get away with a lot of stuff, you know, where she typically wouldn't. So my entire life was built on zero accountability, right? I could do whatever I want and get away with it. So moving into sober living was like a absolutely vital step to even survive or become a man. Right? So I think for men, you know, in similar circumstances, sober living is a segue into, you know, and an opportunity to learn how to be a man, right? And for me, that looked like moving in and you know, meeting dudes that like were doing the right thing, that had that accountability already, that had that responsibility, that had that needed advice, right? Because I'm going through things, right? Like I was one of the stupid ones that got into a relationship at 60 days sober, right? So I'm bringing a lot of problems on that, you know, I typically wouldn't have, but I had men in the house to shoot me straight, like, hey, you're being selfish here. Hey, you're being jealous here. Hey, you're being insecure here. Hey, why are you even in this relationship? Like, she's not stable. You're not stable. You're 30 days separated or 60 days separated from heroin abuse, right? Like, figure your life out, right? And I had people like Garrett, Caleb, this guy Taylor that were there to like take me to meetings. I didn't have a car for the first 2 years of my sobriety, right? So there's opportunities there, whereas if I'm sitting in a room that I'm renting at my mom's house where she's working, how am I going to get to a meeting? Who am I going to talk to when I'm struggling, right? So that structure of moving into sober living, having a curfew, right? Having chores, being required to go to meetings, being required to have a sponsor, being required to, you know, to work a job or do something, right? And be productive, make my bed, do the dishes, things I never did because, you know, mom did it for me, right? So to have that responsibility and that accountability and learn these skill sets to not only live life sufficiently, but to be a man, right? To be honest, right? To take accountability for my own actions, to make changes in my life, right? To work hard. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get into working into treatment, right? If I wasn't in sober living and didn't meet the people there. But there was numerous like instances, like when I first moved in, 2 weeks in, somebody else had we flushed a bag of meth. I convinced them to flush it, right? And then we didn't tell Paul or anything like that, right? We talked about it in evening review. Paul finds out, and then I almost get kicked out, right? But the point being was, I shouldn't have had to convince them to get rid of it. I should have alerted who was in charge, right? And that's where I learned the whole, like, there's no snitching in recovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it affects me, and if I was in a vulnerable state, I easily would have smoked that meth, right? But it's that accountability overall that's bled into my life post sober living, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you just said. I think the biggest part for me was the different stages at which I entered into sober living. I think the first time around, I really had to learn how to grow up, how to make doctor's appointments by myself. I was in a new state, and I had to like learn how to look at all these different resources that were out there. I remember I didn't have a car. I had to walk. I had to humble myself. I had to get food stamps. I had to sit down at DES and get food stamps. I had to learn how to go through all these transitional periods that I don't think I would have been able to do if I was by myself. I wouldn't have had the humility to walk into DES and go get a food stamp card so I had food to eat, and I was rebuilding my life. But being in a situation where I'm around 9 other individuals who are also rebuilding their life, and 2 or 3 other of them are on food stamps, it allowed me to be humble and be like, this is just what I need to do, just like they're doing what they need to do to advance. It also helped me be honest when I'm dealing with problems. I didn't know how to pick up a phone and call friends, or how to call my sponsor, or how to, go to a meeting when I'm having a struggle. And it was super easy for me when there were people who were a little bit farther along in their recovery to say, hey, why don't we go to a meeting? Hey, why are you isolating in your room all alone? Hey, I can tell you just cried, like, what's going on? And if it wasn't for being put in those uncomfortable situations around other people, I would have never been able to experience that type of love and compassion and growth through those tough times. Because if I'm sitting in a room by myself, what am I going to do? I'm going to do what I'm used to. I'm going to go get high. I'm going to go to the bar. I'm going to go find friends socially where I don't have to talk about my feelings. I can stuff them. But when I'm in a place where I'm around other like-minded individuals who have already been through or are going through the exact same things that I'm facing, it just helped me through a growth period. And then again, the accountability, right? The structure of having a curfew at night, having a certain number of meetings to go into. When you have a curfew at night and you realize that you're not doing anything past 12 o'clock, and now you start getting up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning because another guy in the house is working out, right? I was able to set up these structures that I wasn't able to do the majority of my life. And there were people there among different classes, among different paces, right? Some people had more professional jobs. Some people, were just working part-time work at, McDonald's or whatever it was. But being able to see all these people come together and have the same mission of trying to get sober and trying to get their life back or get back on the right track, and having structure and accountability to start, getting up in the morning and going to bed early and checking in at night. There's nothing, I don't need to stay up till 2 o'clock playing video games, right? Like whatever it was, it really helped me to grow as a person.
Yeah, and it is important to touch on that, because a big thing that you're gonna see too is when you move into sober living, chances are 9.9 times out of 10 you're not moving into sober living with like an established like job and like things are going well for you. Most of the time it's like you're coming into that environment straight out of treatment, right? Where maybe you haven't even been working for the past 30, 60, 90 days. Or, you're coming out of a situation where it isn't the best, and what you see is you're gonna have to take that entry-level job maybe, just so you can start learning how to be accountable to your employment and pay your own rent and do all these things. And what you'll find is that typically society as a whole, people who aren't in recovery aren't necessarily going to congratulate you for getting a job at Circle K, or they're not going to be super excited about like, oh, you've got this call center job for like where you're just taking 300 customer service calls all day and getting yelled at, right? But when you're in an environment like sober living, like those are things that people will like celebrate with you, right? Like it's a big deal when a guy comes in out of treatment, doesn't have any money, maybe he's on a promise to pay, we're working with him, and he hits the ground running, he gets a job at the Circle K up the street, and he starts paying off his rent and doing all these things. You're gonna find a lot of support, encouragement, and camaraderie from the guys in the house to help you go through that, where normally you might not. With like other people, right? Like, and so that's a huge benefit of sober living is like, we're gonna celebrate the small wins because you're surrounded by a bunch of guys who are doing the same thing, right? And they understand that it is a process to rebuild your life after you burnt it down in addiction, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you get multiple DUIs and you don't have a license and you have all these fees that you have to pay and you're on probation, and it's very difficult, right, to navigate all of that when you don't have a license, but you have to report to task and take drug tests, but you're taking the bus or you're walking or you're riding your bike and your job is 7.5 miles away and you're biking and busting it there. And like, those are all challenges that it's easier to stay motivated to do those things when you're coming back to a sober living and everybody there is like, heck yeah, dude, like you're doing the deal, like you're getting it done. And you're gonna find that support not only from your peers, but also like management and the people who own the sober living. So huge benefit of putting yourself in that situation because it is a process, and nobody, I'm not gonna say nobody, but most people do not come into sober living because they have a pretty good, great foundation and like a lot of great things going for them.
Well, you bring up a good point, dude. Like it's like I've literally witnessed, and I was one of them, right? Like when I got sober, my first job was native New Yorker in the back, you know, like washing dishes and prepping. I know a guy whose first job was Thai chili to go, right? He worked there for a year, and now he's, you know, making 100 plus, has a family of 3 kids, right? Like so you see, just for the people that like are scared to go to sober living or think that like, oh, this is gonna be my life working at McDonald's. It's like, first, humble yourself, be grateful you have a job and you're not smoking fentanyl. Secondly, it's not gonna end there, right? Like you're good, you get to see that progression as you stay sober over the years of like people's journey from like a 9 to 5 like minimum wage job to like a full-blown career and a family.
It's almost a rite of passage to have like that, you know what I mean? Like that entry level job. Yeah, the get well job, dude. It teaches you a lot about sticking with it and trusting the process. Why don't we transition here real quick into the last segment of the episode, and we're all a living testament of this, friendships, right? You're going to meet people and build relationships with people in sober living, and you hear it all the time and you see it all the time is you'll meet some of your best friends when you go through that process of like going into sober living and actually doing the deal. And like I said, Wade and Ryan both lived together in sober living. I met them because I later on went through the same program and we knew mutual people. But why don't we touch on just relationships, friendships that you'll find in sober living?
I mean, you said it perfectly. I think some of my strongest relationships I have today were built because I was on the battlefield of starting again with these same people. They got to see me at my worst. They're now getting to see me at my best. They've helped me through tough times. I've got to help them through tough times. I think I went through my life, I never didn't have friends. I had good friends. Mm-hmm. But the problem is because of my dishonesty in my addiction, I never really let anybody truly get to know me. And when I got into sober living, not only did they truly get to know me, the good, the bad, you know, the indifferent, but I got to know them for the good, the bad, the indifferent, and I got to form these bonds. You said it best. You know, at this one time, I was in sober living with like 8 out of our 10 people were the same. We always had 2 rotating beds, but like 8 out of the 10 for about a year were the same core group of people. And our relationship in that time of some people relapsing, some people, you know, coming in and coming out for like a week or a month, I'm gonna move out, and then they like end up back with us and we're excited to see them back. But like also seeing those 8 people all attained very different life paths, but like their goals. One was getting back with his fiance. Another one was trying to get his kid back in his life. Another one was, just trying to get a job and kind of maintain. And like to see us all, only 4 short years later, 6 years later, I guess, from 2018, it's crazy to see the lives that were built based on those relationships. And there's a lot of things that have happened in between. I've learned, even just where I'm at in life, there's some people that I have love for, but like I understand that they're not on the same path as me. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I don't love them any less, it's not that I don't like them any less, but what I understand is like, I personally around me in my core circle can't have them around me because they're not going for the same things that I'm going for. And I've had to like struggle with some of these internal battles on relationships of like not cutting people off, but not keeping them so close to me and just trying to people please people because like we're going on different paths. And I think a lot of this is based on that journey of going through sober living, because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't know how to navigate these things. And I have a great group of friends around me. I have people I still stay in touch with. We go watch football on Sundays. I've got to be in weddings. Unfortunately, we've had to go to funerals. I've had to do all of these types of things, but I know when I go to these events, I get to see people I love, I care about, that have seen me at my best and my worst and have loved me through it all. And I think that's an important part, no matter what part. If you're just trying to get back to your family, if you're just trying to get your wife off your back, I needed these people to get Wade outside of Wade in my worst moments. Mm-hmm. When I know I would have sat alone, when I was this close away from a drink or a use, and like I was going through it, these people were there to say, hey, let's go to the gas station. Hey, let's go to this meeting. Hey, let's go check out volleyball. Hey, let's go do this. And like, it took me out of me. And like, that has been the biggest benefit of being in sober living.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point. Like when I get sober, either I burn the bridges of the people that I knew, like the friends that I knew, or, I'm getting sober and I just can't relate to anything that they're going through. Their lives are put together. Like we drank together in high school. Now they have careers and I'm like coming into sober living shot out, right? So, getting to know these people in sober living, right, that like are on this same journey as you, or a similar journey, right? The root cause is the same. You grow these bonds with people, right? And then over the years, like I'm 8.5 years sober and I'm going through like a growing moment right now, a spiritual journey, a struggle, right? And I was just on the phone with somebody last night that I was in sober living with, right? These lifelong bonds of people that you can know and trust fully, right, with everything that you're going through. And like I touched on before, you get to see their journey too, right? It's not just all about me. It's like I get to see the journey of these individuals that started from nothing, right? Like came from the bottom, right? And then now they're here. Now they're killing it. They're killing the game. They're married. They have full-on careers, right? And they're living this life of peace and contentment and happiness and a relationship with God, right? And some of the people that I meet through osmosis of people in sober living become some of the closest to me, right? So it's like I feel like everybody I know to some extent comes from that 7 degrees of separation of sober living, right? That's my entire world. So and that's okay with me, right? I still have friends that are not in recovery. I still have friends that are normies, but as far as like what I'm going through, my internal struggles or stuff like that, I'm not going to them for that. I'm going to people that have a relationship with God through the program of recovery, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, man, I would encourage anybody that's moving into sober living, that is in sober living, or that has been in sober living. Reach out to the people that you know if you're going through something, right? And I guarantee you they're gonna help you through it.
100%. And I just want to do a quick shout out to a guy that so Wade and Brian were both in sober living prior to when I first met them, but we did have a friend come along a couple months after me, Damon, that was in the same treatment center, went to the same sober livings, again, Paul Garcia. See how that's all connected. And he is getting married in a couple of months, and I get to be a groomsman in his wedding and be there for him on his biggest day. And those are all just relationships that started with being in sober living and doing the work, man. So it is super cool, and we have some houses, even in the Plugged In network, where there's guys that have been living together for over a year now, and they're buying cars and making plans of moving out, and it's like, It's a really cool process, and we just wanted to shed light on some of the funny stuff that you may see, but also just like real world lessons that we've all learned from being in sober living. So if you guys want some more information on this episode, there is a full blog out on our website, pluggedinrecovery.com, where you can find different articles and stuff on people's experiences in sober living. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. I think we're like 6 subscribers away. We're at like 94 subscribers right now. So we're rounding out almost to 100, but we appreciate all your support. That's the best way to support us, is to subscribe to our channel, like our content on social media. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart Podcasts. We appreciate it. Super happy to have Ryan on with us this week, and we'll see you guys next week.